Who wants the grand tour? Anybody else? That was a hell of a thing.
You've quoted the lines. You love the characters. You know, Galaxy Quest is one of the most perfect sci-fi comedies ever made. But the story of how it got to the screen is even crazier than the movie itself. Today, we're revealing 20 weird facts you probably didn't know. We'll uncover how Tim Allen's on-set breakdown was written right into the script, why the original director's choice for the captain was replaced, and how a last-minute joke became one of the biggest laughs in the movie. By Grab Thar's Hammer. Let's get into it. If this movie still lives in your heart, do us a favor, drop a like on this video, and make sure you're subscribed for more stories from cinematic history. It's hard to imagine Galaxy Quest as anything but the pitch-perfect, PG-rated adventure we all love. Its charm comes from that broad appeal. It's a film families can watch together that gently pokes fun at its source material without ever getting mean. But the original vision for the film was way darker and much, much filthier. The first script leaned heavily into a hard, R-rated tone. The jokes were more cynical, the language was saltier, and the vibe was less of a loving homage and more of a scathing parody. When director Dean Parisot came on board, he realized they had a problem. An R-rated spoof of a G-rated phenomenon like Star Trek just didn't make any sense. They would completely miss their target audience. So the decision was made to pivot. The script went through huge rewrites to pull back from the edge, aiming for a tone that was clever but ultimately warm-hearted. This change was crucial. It turned the film from a niche, cynical comedy into a universally beloved classic, focusing on the themes of found family and rediscovering purpose that have given it such incredible longevity. Before it was Galaxy Quest. The project went by a much more generic, almost placeholder-sounding title, Captain Starshine. The original script carried this name, and while it gets the point across, it just doesn't have the punch of Galaxy Quest. Captain Starshine sounds like a direct parody of a single character like Captain Kirk, suggesting a story focused on one man. Changing the title to Galaxy Quest was a subtle but brilliant move. It immediately broadened the scope. This wasn't just about one washed-up actor, it was about the entire crew, the ship, the fans, and the fictional TV show they all inhabited. Galaxy Quest sounds like a real series from the 70s or 80s, the kind of thing that would have its own conventions. The name change was a key step in shaping the film's identity, moving it from a simple spoof of a sci-fi captain toward an intricate homage to an entire genre and its passionate fandom. Long before Dean Parisot took the helm of The Protector, another comedy legend was in the captain's chair, Harold Ramis. The director of classics like Caddyshack and Groundhog Day was initially attached to direct, and he had a very specific vision. He saw the project as a sharp, character-based comedy, and his #1 choice for Commander Peter Quincy Taggart was Alec Baldwin. Ramis believed Baldwin could perfectly capture the blend of ego and insecurity the role needed. But it wasn't meant to be. Ramis and the studio, DreamWorks, started having creative differences, especially over casting. While Ramis was championing Alec Baldwin, DreamWorks co-founder Jeffrey Katzenberg had his eye on Tim Allen. Allen was at the peak of his fame with Home Improvement and as the voice of Buzz Lightyear. Katzenberg saw him as the more bankable, family-friendly star. The disagreement became a major sticking point, and Harold Ramis eventually left the project. His exit paved the way for Dean Parisot to take over and for the studio to get their man. It remains one of Hollywood's great what-ifs. Even after Harold Ramis left, the idea of Alec Baldwin leading the cast didn't die immediately. In fact, Baldwin was incredibly passionate about the role. He'd read the script, loved the character of Jason Nesmith, and was very interested in the part. He understood the character's core conflict, a man who was both a pompous fraud and a charismatic leader trapped by a persona he'd grown to resent. For a while, he was the front-runner. But Jeffrey Katzenberg's influence at DreamWorks proved to be the deciding factor. He was adamant that Tim Allen was the right choice. His reasoning was all about marketability. At the time, Tim Allen was America's dad, a beloved comedy star whose name on a poster was a guaranteed draw. The studio saw the film as a major holiday release and wanted a star who felt safe and familiar to mainstream audiences. Despite Baldwin's enthusiasm, the studio's preference won out. The role was officially offered to Tim Allen, and Alec Baldwin's chance to command the Protector was lost. The search for the perfect Jason Nesmith wasn't just a two-horse race between Baldwin and Allen. The casting net was thrown wide, and several other major comedy stars were considered. Among the most prominent names were Kevin Kline and Steve Martin. Both had the comedic chops and dramatic weight to pull off the role. Kevin Kline, especially, had a history of playing egotistical but lovable characters in films like A Fish, called Wanda. He had a theatricality that would have been a perfect fit for Nesmith's convention appearances. Steve Martin was another fascinating possibility. His brand of comedy, often blending absurdity with surprising moments of pathos, could have taken the character in a completely different direction. But as the process wore on, Tim Allen's star power just kept growing. His role as Buzz Lightyear in Toy Story was especially relevant. In Buzz, Allen had already proven he could play a character who mistakenly believes his fictional persona is real, a theme at the very heart of Galaxy Quest. That parallel, combined with his TV popularity, made him seem like the perfect choice. Steven Spielberg, a co-founder of DreamWorks, was a kind of godfather to the production. He'd occasionally visit the set to offer suggestions, and when Steven Spielberg has an idea, you listen. According to a now legendary on-set story, he was looking at the bridge of the NSEA Protector and thought the floor could use a little more visual flair. He suggested covering it with a shiny metallic mylar material to reflect the set's complex lighting. It sounded like a brilliant touch from a master. The art department got to work, plastering the floor with the reflective material. But they quickly ran into a catastrophic problem. The powerful hot lights hanging above the set were being focused and intensified by the mylar like a magnifying glass in the sun. The material started to buckle, then smoke, and then it burst into flames. A fire broke out on the set, causing a panic as the crew scrambled to put it out. Thankfully, no one was hurt, but it became an unforgettable story. The day a friendly suggestion from one of the world's greatest directors nearly burned the whole set down. Casting Sigourney Weaver, the iconic Ellen Ripley, as the token blonde bombshell Gwen DeMarco was a stroke of meta-genius. Here was the most famous female hero in sci-fi history, playing a character whose main job is to repeat whatever the ship's computer says. It brilliantly subverted her own legendary status. But what many people don't realize is that despite her mark on the genre, Weaver never really considered herself a huge sci-fi fan. She was drawn to the Alien films because of the great character and story, not because of a deep love for spaceships. This created a funny dynamic on set, especially with her co-star, Tim Allen, a self-proclaimed sci-fi nerd who was totally starstruck to be working with Ripley. He even brought in his personal model of the Nostromo from Alien and asked her to sign it. In a perfect moment, she playfully signed it. Stolen by Tim Allen, love, Sigourney Weaver. She fully embraced the parody, including the somewhat ridiculous blonde wig, which was a direct nod to the unflattering roles often given to women in classic sci-fi shows. While Sigourney Weaver was a tourist in the sci-fi world, Tim Allen was a lifelong resident. He was a genuine, passionate fan, and his deep knowledge ended up directly influencing the script. He wasn't just an actor playing a part, he was a fan living the dream. He would frequently question the logic of scenes, not as an actor, but as a sci-fi aficionado, pointing out inconsistencies that a casual viewer might miss, but a die-hard fan would definitely notice. His most significant contribution came from a simple question. During a scene where the crew first lands on an alien planet, Alan stopped and asked, "Wait a minute, how do we know there's a breathable atmosphere here?" It was a classic sci-fi trope that often gets ignored. The writers realized he had a point. It was exactly the kind of nitpicky detail the fans in the movie would obsess over. So, they wrote his concern right into the script. The line was given to Fred Quan, played by Tony Shalhoub, who nonchalantly remarks on the breathable air. Alan's nerdy passion helped sharpen the film's satire and added a layer of authenticity. Alan Rickman's portrayal of Sir Alexander Dane, the Shakespearean actor forced to endlessly repeat a catchphrase, is one of the most beloved parts of the film. But behind the scenes, Rickman initially resented the role, an experience that perfectly mirrored his character's frustrations. He had just come off a string of serious dramatic projects and was not in the mood for what he saw as a light, silly comedy. This frustration was made worse during costume fittings. When he was presented with the heavy prosthetic headpiece his character, Dr. Lazarus, had to wear, he was mortified. For the first few weeks, he was reportedly quite grumpy, channeling the very essence of Alexander Dane. But as filming went on, something shifted. He started to see the genius in the script and the heart behind the parody. The turning point seemed to come as Rickman watched the other actors fully commit to their comedic roles. He began to relax, finding both the humor and the pathos in his character's plight. His initial hatred for the part ironically allowed him to connect with Alexander Dane on a profound level. One of the most memorable sequences in Galaxy Quest is the journey through a corridor of chompers, massive, pounding metal presses that threaten to crush the crew. The scene is a brilliant piece of suspenseful comedy, a death trap so ridiculously designed it could only exist in a poorly written TV show. The inspiration came from parodying the very idea of nonsensical danger seen in old sci-fi shows. While some fans have compared it to the spinning gravity core in the sci-fi horror film Event Horizon, the sequence is really a jab at any show that would invent an absurdly dangerous corridor for the sake of cheap drama. The creators took that concept, needlessly dangerous hallway, and played it for laughs. The result is a masterclass in tone. The danger feels real enough to create tension, especially for Sam Rockwell's terrified character, Guy. But the sheer absurdity of the chompers' design and the crew's bumbling attempts to get through them makes the sequence hilarious. It's a perfect example of how Galaxy Quest took familiar sci-fi ideas and twisted them just enough to turn terror into comedy gold. The appearance of the rock monsters on the desert planet isn't just a fun action sequence, it's a deep cut. Inside joke aimed directly at Star Trek and William Shatner. The joke goes back to the 1989 film Star Trek V: The Final Frontier, which Shatner himself directed. In his original script, Captain Kirk was supposed to come face-to-face with God, who would then send a legion of rock monsters to attack him. But the studio balked. The special effects needed to create an army of convincing rock monsters in 1989 were way too expensive. Shatner was forced to scrap the sequence, and it became a famous story of creative compromise. The writers of Galaxy Quest, being huge Star Trek fans, knew this story well. As a loving tribute and a playful jab, they decided to give their captain the rock monsters that Shatner was denied. When Shatner eventually saw the movie, he reportedly loved it and immediately got the joke, laughing about how Tim Allen got to fight the rock monsters his movie couldn't afford. Sam Rockwell's performance as Guy Fleegman, the terrified, expendable, redshirt character, is a masterclass in comedic anxiety. To achieve this state of perpetual panic, Rockwell didn't just rely on his acting skills. He turned to chemistry. He developed a method of using stimulants to heighten his character's nervous energy and make his fear feel more authentic. Before shooting his scenes, Rockwell would drink tons of coffee, jolting his system with caffeine to induce genuine jitters and anxiety. He wanted to feel as on edge as Guy was supposed to be. The technique worked almost too well. His performance is filled with a frenetic, wide-eyed terror that's both hilarious and believable. The downside? After a long day of shooting in a state of caffeinated panic, he found it hard to wind down. He would sometimes have a couple of beers at the end of the day just to come down. It was a demanding approach to a comedic role, but it paid off beautifully. The Theurians are one of the most endearing alien races in cinema, and a huge part of their charm comes from their strange, awkward physicality. Their jerky movements and tilted heads perfectly capture their nature as a species that learned about humanity by watching TV. This distinct physicality wasn't an accident. It was the result of a deliberate and unusual rehearsal process. The actors playing the Theurians, led by Enrico Colantoni as Mathesar, worked together to develop a specific Theurian way of moving. Their process was collaborative and experimental. They watched old sci-fi shows, paying close attention to the often stilted performances of guest actors playing aliens. They drew inspiration from how people act when they're trying to imitate something they don't fully understand. Enrico Colantoni, in particular, was a leader in this process, creating a foundation for the Theurian posture and cadence that the other actors then built upon. This dedicated character work is what makes the Theurians feel so cohesive and believable as a species. When it came time to bring the aliens of Galaxy Quest to life, the production turned to an undisputed legend, Stan Winston. His studio was the king of practical creature effects, responsible for the dinosaurs of Jurassic Park, the T-800 from The Terminator, and the xenomorph queen in Aliens. Having Stan Winston on board was a massive seal of approval, signaling that even though this was a comedy, it was taking its creature design very seriously. Winston's team was responsible for the film's entire menagerie of aliens. They designed the octopus-like true forms of the Theurians. They created the fearsome reptilian villain, Saris, and perhaps most famously, they created the pig lizard, the bizarre creature that gets teleported and promptly turns inside out. Winston's involvement ensured that the film's aliens felt tangible and real, which was essential for the comedy to work. The threat from Saris had to feel genuine, and the innocence of the Theurians had to be believable. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to a movie is for the studio executives to be looking the other way. This was exactly the case for Galaxy Quest. While the film was in production at DreamWorks, the studio was pouring most of its attention and anxiety into another, much bigger project, Ridley Scott's historical epic, Gladiator. Gladiator was seen as the studio's major prestige picture, a potential Oscar contender, and a massive financial gamble. The executives were consumed by its troubled production. This intense focus on Gladiator meant that the filmmakers of Galaxy Quest, led by director Dean Parisot, were largely left alone. They weren't being bombarded with studio notes or second-guessed on tone. They had the freedom to make the movie they wanted to make. This benign neglect turned out to be an incredible blessing. It allowed the film's quirky, specific, and heartfelt tone to develop organically without being sanded down by a committee. It's a classic Hollywood irony. The film the studio paid less attention to ended up becoming one of its most beloved classics. One of the biggest laughs in the movie comes from a simple sight gag. As Jason Nesmith takes the helm of the Protector, for the first time he tries to make a cool, dramatic departure from the space dock. Instead, he massively misjudges the clearance and scrapes the side of the ship with a horrible, screeching groan. It's a perfect puncture of his ego and a hilarious subversion of a classic sci-fi trope. But this iconic moment wasn't in the original script. The idea came from screenwriter Bob Gordon late in the process. He was looking for a way to add more physical comedy and to visually represent Nesmith's incompetence. Gordon's idea to add the scrape was pure genius. It's a joke that works on multiple levels. It's a bad driver gag in a sci-fi setting. It instantly shows these actors have no idea what they're doing, and it provides a great payoff later when the dent is still visible. The studio and effects team loved it, and the joke became one of the film's most memorable moments. Long before viral marketing became standard practice, Galaxy Quest was breaking new ground. Understanding that the film was all about fandom and obsession, the marketing team at DreamWorks came up with a brilliant idea. They created a real website for the fictional TV show, Galaxy Quest. But they didn't make it a slick corporate movie site. Instead, they designed it to look exactly like a real, amateurish, GeoCities-style fan page from the late 1990s. The website was a masterpiece of period detail. It was built with clumsy HTML and featured low-res GIFs, blinking text, and heartfelt essays about the show's lore. It had episode guides, actor bios, and even a guest book. For anyone stumbling upon it without context, it was completely convincing. This was one of the first times a studio used the internet not just to advertise a film, but to build out its fictional world and engage with its audience in a creative way. The website perfectly captured the spirit of the film it was promoting. Tony. Shalhoub's character, Fred Quan, is a total scene stealer. His perpetually laid-back demeanor is a hilarious contrast to the chaos unfolding around him. While everyone else is screaming, Fred is calmly commenting on the snacks or delivering his iconic line, "That was a hell of a thing." There's a subtle, running joke behind Fred's unflappable nature that's never stated, but heavily implied and confirmed by the filmmakers. His character is perpetually stoned. This choice was developed by Shalhoub and the director to explain Fred's bizarrely calm reactions to mortal peril. If you rewatch the film with this in mind, his performance takes on a whole new layer of comedy. His non-sequiturs, his fascination with the food replicator, and his complete lack of urgency all point to a man enjoying the cosmic ride on a slightly different wavelength. It's a brilliant, understated character choice that explains everything about his performance without ever having to spell it out. The scene where a cute little alien, the pig lizard, is accidentally run through the ship's digital conveyor is a moment of shocking and hilarious gore. The creature is teleported, horribly turns inside out, and then explodes. In the final cut, it's a quick, brutally funny moment. But the original version was even more graphic and was trimmed down after it horrified a test audience, the Stan Winston. Studio had created a sophisticated and stomach-churning animatronic for the effect. The original sequence showed the pig lizard's transformation in much greater, more explicit detail. When the filmmakers showed this early cut to an audience, the reaction wasn't laughter, it was genuine horror. Viewers had grown attached to the cute creature, and watching it meet such a gruesome end was more disturbing than funny. The filmmakers realized they had crossed a line. The scene was re-edited to be much quicker, dialing back the horror and dialing up the comedic shock. The emotional heart of the film is when Jason Nesmith finally confesses the truth to the Theurians. He breaks down, admitting that he and his crew are just actors, that their show was fake, and that he is a fraud. It's a powerful, raw moment. For Tim Allen, an actor known for broad comedy, it was a huge dramatic challenge. On the day of the shoot, something incredible happened. Steven Spielberg, who was rarely on set, decided to pay a visit. The pressure of performing this pivotal scene in front of the legendary director was immense. Allen channeled that pressure into his performance, digging deep and delivering a take filled with genuine emotion and unexpected tears. He became so caught up in the moment that he reportedly had a real emotional breakdown on set. The crew was stunned. After the take, Alan Rickman, in his characteristically dry way, quipped, "My God, I think he just experienced acting." Spielberg was deeply moved and personally complimented Allen on the power of his performance. It was a moment where the line between actor and character blurred, resulting in the most honest and powerful scene in the movie. And that's the story of how Galaxy Quest became a masterpiece. It's a tale of happy accidents, brilliant creative choices, and a production that, against all odds, managed to capture lightning in a bottle. The film's journey was as unpredictable as a ride through a chomper-filled corridor. Galaxy Quest started as a parody of a beloved sci-fi institution, but it ended up becoming one itself. A timeless film that understood the real magic isn't just in the spaceships, but in the fans who love them and the flawed heroes who learn to believe in their own legend. It reminds us to never give up and never surrender. As a final treat, here's one more bonus fact. The film's primary villain, the menacing reptilian warlord General Saris, was named after a famously critical film critic, Andrew Saris. The Village Voice critic was known for his sometimes harsh reviews, so the filmmakers decided to have a little fun at his expense. It's a subtle, inside baseball joke that shows the playful spirit that infused every frame of this sci-fi classic. What's your favorite Galaxy Quest quote? Which of these facts surprised you the most? Let us know down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this journey behind the scenes, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss another story. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.